One desperate hug to escape her ex, and she accidentally touched the loneliest billionaire in the city. She thought she'd healed, until she saw him, her ex, walking in with his new fiancée. Perfect smile, perfect dress, the kind of woman the world tells men to choose when they've outgrown you. For a split second, every piece of confidence she'd rebuilt cracked. Her breath caught, her palms trembled. She didn't want him to see her alone. Again. So she turned, panicked, and did the unthinkable. She wrapped her arms around the first man she saw, a stranger. His suit felt like cold silk against her skin, his hand steady, grounding. "Are you okay?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She couldn't, because in that moment, she didn't know that the man she clung to like air was a billionaire who hadn't been touched like that in years. And maybe that hug wasn't an accident at all. Would you have run or reached for someone? Stay with this story, because sometimes healing begins with a single, reckless hug. Her fingers loosened first. Heat rushed to her face as she realized what she had done. She stepped back, words tripping over each other, half-formed apologies caught in her throat. "I'm so sorry," she managed. "I didn't mean—" He shook his head once, calm, the ghost of a smile softening the edge of her panic. "It's okay," he said quietly. For a heartbeat, they only looked at each other, two strangers sharing a silence that felt far too intimate. Around them, voices and music returned, the world pressing in again. Emma wanted to disappear, to find the nearest exit and pretend none of it happened. But his hand lingered near her elbow, steady, polite, almost protective. "You looked like you needed saving," he said. "Maybe I did," she whispered. Her laugh was shaky, half shame, half relief. She didn't know his name, only that his voice had steadied something that had been trembling in her for years. And when he finally let go, she already missed the weight of his hand. She didn't know it yet, but the world had just changed shape around her. The lobby shimmered under chandeliers, golden light, polished marble, laughter that sounded practiced. Emma felt the air tighten around her. Her shoes pinched. The dress she'd bought on clearance itched at the seam. She moved through the crowd like a shadow, careful not to brush against anyone too important. Crystal glasses chimed. Names floated past. Executives, investors, families whose last names opened doors she had never seen. Across the room, the stranger, the man she'd hugged, stood taller than the rest. People glanced at him, nodded with quiet respect, though she couldn't tell why. He didn't look like he belonged either. Emma found refuge near a potted palm, pretending to check her phone. Her reflection in this black screen showed a woman trying to stay invisible. Still, the memory of his voice, steady, warm, echoed through her chest. She wasn't sure what embarrassed her more, the hug itself or how safe it had felt. And when she finally looked up, she saw him watching her from across the room, not judging, simply noticing. The kind of noticing she hadn't felt in a very long time. He crossed the room slowly, cutting through the noise until he stood beside her. "Still breathing?" he asked. The question was gentle, teasing just enough to make her smile. "I think so," she said. "Barely." He laughed, low and quiet, a sound that drew warmth into the cold corners of the evening. A waiter passed. He handed her a glass of champagne. She hesitated, then took it. Bubbles rose like tiny escapes. They talked about nothing. The music, the lights, how neither of them really liked crowds. It felt easy, surprising after the chaos of moments ago. She told him she'd come only to drop off a wedding gift. He nodded. "So did I. Well, almost." For the first time in months, she laughed without forcing it. The sound startled her. He looked pleased, not flattered. When silence settled again, it wasn't awkward. It felt like standing at the edge of something possible. Emma didn't realize that a stranger's kindness could feel like home. They found a quiet corner near the window, city lights spreading beneath them. "I'm Emma," she said, offering her hand. "Daniel," he replied. "Daniel Archer." The name meant nothing to her, but he noticed the relief in her face when she didn't flinch. "You don't recognize it," he said. "Should I?" "Not tonight," he answered, smiling. His voice carried the calm of someone used to control. Still, there was a trace of weariness behind it, a tired grace money couldn't polish away. He asked about her work. She spoke of the books and small dreams she hadn't chased. He listened, really listened, as if the rest of the room had vanished. Outside, rain began to press softly against the glass. She didn't know he owned half the skyline they were staring at. She only knew his presence quieted the noise inside her head. When he excused himself to refill their drinks, Emma whispered his name under her breath. Daniel Archer. It felt solid, ordinary, safe, and that safety would soon be the most dangerous thing of all. Daniel hadn't planned to attend the wedding. He'd declined the invitation 3 times. But the groom's father was his business partner, and keeping peace had its price. He'd promised himself to stay 15 minutes, shake hands, smile, leave. He hated these events, the false laughter, the constant calculations behind every glance. The room glittered, but it all felt empty. Until her, the woman who collided with him out of nowhere, her arms tight around him, trembling like she was holding on to life itself. That single moment had silenced everything else. Her heartbeat had thundered against his chest, real, unfiltered. He couldn't remember the last time something had felt that human. Now, standing across the room, he watched her slip into the crowd. He didn't even know her name, but the scent of her perfume lingered, soft and honest, like rain on concrete. For the first time in months, Daniel Archer wasn't thinking about mergers, investors, or losses. He was thinking about the stranger who'd hugged him without knowing who he was, and somehow, he didn't want the night to end yet. They found each other again later, drawn by coincidence, or something quieter. The noise below faded when the elevator doors opened. A rooftop bar stretched before them, city lights trembling like scattered stars. Emma leaned on the railing, her heels dangling from her fingers. "I can't feel my feet," she said. Daniel smiled. "Then maybe you're finally relaxed." She laughed softly. The sound carried into the wind. For a while, they said nothing, just the hum of the city between them. He watched her hair move in the breeze, saw the way her shoulders dropped as if a weight had slipped away. For him, it was the first calm he'd felt in weeks. No boardrooms, no cameras, no masks, just 2 people sharing air. When she turned to him, her eyes were gentle, unsure. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not letting me fall apart." And he didn't answer. He only raised his glass slightly. "To small rescues," he said. And she smiled, like the night had finally forgiven her. Later, their talk wandered toward the things that stayed unspoken. She asked what he did for a living. He hesitated. "A little of everything," he said. "Mostly problems with too many zeros." She grinned. "So, complicated money." He laughed once, then quieted. "Hard to tell what people want when you have distractions." "Distractions?" she asked. He looked out at the skyline, the kind that blind you. Houses, headlines, attention. They make noise, loud enough to drown truth. Emma studied him. The honesty in his tone startled her. He wasn't bragging. He sounded tired. For a long moment, neither spoke. The city below flickered, cold and golden. And she understood. Loneliness looked the same at every height. "You don't like your world very much, do you?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "It doesn't like me either." She smiled faintly, eyes soft with something close to compassion. He met her gaze, and for the first time, Daniel felt seen. Without introduction, without title. The night stopped feeling borrowed. It started to feel real. Morning light filtered through Emma's blinds, pale and forgiving. She'd convinced herself the evening had meant nothing more than polite kindness. People like him didn't call. Then her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You left your courage on the rooftop. I figured I should return it." Her breath caught. A laugh slipped out before she could stop it. She typed back, "I'm still looking for it." He replied, "Then I'll bring it to you. Where should I deliver?" She stared at the words, heart unsteady. This wasn't a line. It felt like a beginning. After a pause, she typed, "Bookstore on Elm, 10 a.m. No emojis, no overthinking. Just a simple place that felt safe. When she put the phone down, her hands trembled again, but not from fear. Something new stirred in her chest, small but alive. It felt like hope, and it terrified her more than heartbreak ever had. The bell over the bookstore door chimed softly. He was already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor between poetry shelves. A man in a tailored coat, reading like the world had forgotten him. Emma froze, breath catching at the quiet simplicity of it. No suit, no pretense, just him. He looked up. "You're really here," he said. "So are you," she answered. "I half expected you to land in a helicopter." He laughed, warm and real. "Not really my style." They wandered through aisles lined with stories older than their pain. He listened to her talk about writing, the book she never finished. He told her he envied her ordinary life. For 2 hours, they weren't exes or CEOs or survivors. They were just people trying to remember what it felt like to be known. When they stepped outside, sunlight broke over the buildings. Daniel smiled. "Maybe courage isn't lost," he said. "Maybe you just left it with me." And Emma, finally, didn't look away. They sat on a bench outside the bookstore, paper cups of coffee cooling between them. Emma talked about the book she once tried to write, how it lived in a drawer, half finished, half forgotten. "I wanted to write about ordinary women," she said, "the kind who survive quietly." Daniel listened. No interruptions, only quiet attention. He told her he used to dream of being anonymous, of walking through the world unseen. "No one sees me," he said. "They see what I own." The honesty startled them both. Different worlds, same loneliness. A bus passed, stirring the morning air. Emma smiled faintly. "Maybe we're both hiding," she said. "Maybe," he replied, "but you hide in stories. I hide in noise." Their eyes met. The space between them didn't feel like a gap anymore. It felt like a reflection, soft and real. Days passed quietly. They walked through the city, bookstores, small cafes, corners no one noticed. Emma laughed more. Daniel spoke less, but every word carried weight. They shared fragments of their pasts. She told him about her mother's small apartment, the smell of rain and coffee. He told her about a business deal that had cost him his first friendship. The details didn't matter. The truth did. Sometimes silence replaced talk, not empty, just peaceful. They learned each other's rhythms, the pauses, the breaths between thoughts. At a crosswalk, she slipped her hand through his arm without thinking. He adjusted his pace to match hers. No words, no reaction, only quiet understanding. She looked up at him, the city light soft on his face. "Do you ever wish life could stay this small?" He smiled. "Every day." That night, curiosity found her again. She opened her laptop, hesitated, then typed his name. Daniel Archer. The screen filled with headlines. CEO, billionaire, heir, his face beside world leaders and global foundations. Her breath slowed. The man who sat on a bookstore floor reading poetry owned half the skyline behind it. She scrolled through pictures, galas, awards, flashes of cameras. Each image pulled him further away. The memory of his laugh felt impossible now. She closed the laptop, but the glow stayed in her chest, cold and heavy. Had she been foolish to believe he was just a man? Her reflection in the screen looked back, small and uncertain. She leaned back on the couch, palms pressed to her eyes. The silence in the room grew sharp. For the first time, she felt the space between them stretch wider than she could cross. Morning came with unease. She read the headlines again, each one louder than the last. Daniel Archer, the billionaire visionary. The name felt heavier now that she knew it. She remembered his voice from the rooftop, steady and human. How had he carried that name without breaking under it? Outside, the city glittered with ambition. It was his world. High glass, sharp edges, endless noise. Her world felt smaller, softer, but suddenly fragile. Her phone buzzed. A message. Good morning. Simple, like any other day. She stared at it, typed, erased, then typed again. Finally, she wrote, Morning. He replied with a smile emoji. It made her heart twist. He was still Daniel, but she couldn't stop seeing the weight of Archer behind him. 2 days passed in quiet. Then her phone lit up again. A photo, 3 books spread across a table, each with a note inside. His message read, If you won't write your own stories yet, I'll read the ones you love. She stared at the picture, her throat tight. He'd remembered every title she'd mentioned. No one had ever done that before. It wasn't grand. It was precise. It meant he listened. He cared about what stayed unseen. She typed back, You're reading dangerous books, Daniel. He replied, Good. Maybe they'll teach me something true. Emma laughed softly. The fear she'd carried since that night began to fade. He was still the man who sat on the bookstore floor, who looked at her like she wasn't invisible. The distance between them felt smaller now, at least for a while. They met again on her apartment rooftop. The city stretched below, sunlight soft against the concrete. Emma brought pastries. Daniel carried 2 coffees. He loosened his tie, set his phone aside. They talked about nothing and everything. Jobs, small mistakes, the kind of regrets people collect quietly. Emma laughed until her stomach hurt. Daniel just watched her, a smile playing at the edge of calm. Between stories, silence settled. It wasn't awkward, it was easy, like exhaling. He leaned back, eyes on the sky. I've been followed all my life, he said, but rarely chosen. She looked at him, unsure if he meant it for her, but his tone was steady, honest. No bitterness, just truth. For the first time she saw the man behind the headlines, and he saw her not as an escape, but as something real. When the wind lifted her hair across her face, he reached out without thinking, tucking it behind her ear. Neither spoke again for a long time. The air carried enough words for both. Night fell slow and kind. They left a poetry reading, laughter still warm between them. At the curb, a black SUV pulled up. A man in a suit stepped out, crisp and efficient. Sorry to interrupt, sir. Emergency board call in 20. Emma froze. The word sir echoed. Daniel's posture shifted. 1 second of distance, small but visible. He looked at her, apology already in his eyes. I'll call you after, he said. She nodded, though her throat felt tight. The car door closed, glass tinted, engine low. Then he was gone. The silence that followed felt heavier than noise. She walked home with her heels in her hand, the city lights blurring. 1 night passed, then another. No call, no message. By the 3rd, she stopped checking her phone. She told herself this was what people like him did. Move fast, forget easy. But part of her still waited for the sound of his name lighting up her screen. On the 4th night, her phone finally buzzed. Daniel, I'm sorry, I should have explained. Can we talk? Emma stared at the message, her pulse quickening. She typed, deleted, then typed again. I don't know if I can do this. I'm not like women in your world. The reply came fast. That's exactly why I'm still here. She set the phone down, exhaling shakily. The words felt too simple, too kind, but they cut through the fear she'd been feeding. Her fingers hovered over the screen again. Then maybe we should start over, she wrote. No titles, no past, just you and me. Deal, he sent back. For the first time in days, her chest didn't ache. She leaned back on the couch, eyes closed, the smallest smile finding her. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle and steady. It sounded a lot like relief. A week later, Daniel invited her to an art fundraiser downtown. She hesitated before answering. Daniel, that's your world, not mine. He smiled through the phone. Then let's build a new one. His voice carried no persuasion, only patience. Still, doubt lingered. She pictured champagne glasses, cameras, women who belonged in silk and diamonds. She pictured herself, a woman still learning how to believe she fit anywhere. He sensed it. You don't have to prove anything, he said. Just show up. The next day, she stood before her closet, staring at nothing that felt enough. Her reflection frowned back, unsure. Then she whispered, "Maybe showing up is enough." When she called him to say yes, her voice trembled. He didn't comment on it. He only said, "Good, I'll handle the rest." Something inside her shifted. Not confidence, just courage, raw and new. The boutique smelled like lavender and quiet money. Emma followed Daniel through aisles of fabric she was afraid to touch. He said nothing, only waited. She tried on 3 dresses. None felt like her. The 4th, deep green, long sleeves, soft and forgiving, made her pause. When she stepped out, Daniel looked up from his phone, his breath caught almost imperceptibly. She turned toward the mirror, studying the reflection. "I don't belong in your world," she whispered. He walked closer, voice low. "Then let's build a new one." Her eyes met his in the glass. No music, no grand moment, just truth shared in silence. She smoothed the dress with trembling hands. He smiled. "That one," he said. Emma nodded, unsure if he meant the dress or her. But for the first time, the mirror didn't feel like the enemy. It felt like a door she was almost ready to open. The night of the fundraiser arrived. Soft music drifted across the room, glass and laughter blending into a single hum. Emma stepped out of the elevator, heart pounding beneath the green dress. Daniel waited, no tie, sleeves rolled once, smile calm. He offered his arm. "Ready?" "Not even close," she said, forcing a small laugh. Inside, people turned. Not cruelly, just curious. The kind of curiosity that weighed more than judgment. Daniel greeted a few guests, always keeping her within reach. When someone asked, "How did you two meet?" Emma hesitated, then smiled. "I panicked and hugged him." The table laughed, surprised. Daniel's hand found hers under the tablecloth, steady and warm. He laughed too, the sound honest, unbothered. For a moment she stopped caring who watched. The air softened. He looked at her like the world had slowed just for this small truth. And though she still felt out of place, she wasn't invisible anymore. Later, she slipped out to the balcony for air. The night was cooler there, quieter. City lights stretched below like a promise she couldn't quite touch. Behind her, voices carried through the glass doors. 2 men spoke, careless and low. "Cute, but temporary," one said. "These girls never last long. Daniel always goes back to his own kind." Emma froze. The words hit harder than they meant to, not because they were new, because they were familiar. She stared at her reflection in the glass. Woman in a borrowed world, pretending not to break. Inside, laughter continued, soft and far away. Her throat tightened. She turned, walking quickly toward the elevator, heels silent against marble. She didn't look back. She didn't want to see if Daniel noticed. The doors closed, cutting off the sound of everything she almost believed in. The next morning, a knock came at her door. Daniel stood there, no driver, no pretense, holding an envelope. "I heard what they said," he began. She crossed her arms, fighting the ache in her chest. "Were they wrong?" He didn't flinch. "They were cruel." He handed her the envelope. "This isn't about them." Inside was a folded lease, space next to the bookstore. "I bought it for you," he said. "No strings, no conditions, just your own place." Her eyes filled before she could stop them. "Why?" "Because you should have something that's yours, even if I'm not part of it." Emma shook her head, tears slipping free. "This is too much." "No," he said softly. "You are." She pressed the paper against her chest, then handed it back. "I can't take this," she whispered. Daniel's voice stayed steady. "Then keep the idea, until you can." She didn't see him again. Days turned into weeks, each one quieter than the last. She told herself distance was safer, that maybe silence could make her brave, but the ache never faded. It deepened. Every morning she walked past the empty storefront, hand brushing the glass. Every night she almost texted, then stopped. Daniel, too, kept his promise. No messages, no calls. He filled his days with meetings, dinners, the noise he'd used to escape himself, but every empty space reminded him of her. At night, he scrolled through her favorite authors online. The act meant nothing and everything. It was the only way to stay near her without breaking his word. They both waited, each convinced the other had moved on, each carrying the same quiet ache of someone who hadn't. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived at Emma's door. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typed, "You were never small. You just held yourself in so tightly no one could see how big your heart was." She read it twice, the words trembling in her hands. He had said those exact lines once, only then, out loud. Her breath broke, not from pain, but from the sudden rush of memory. His voice, his patience, the way he looked at her like she mattered. She sat on the floor, letter against her chest. Tears slipped down her face, silent and steady. For the first time, she didn't feel ashamed of them. Outside, the world moved as always, but inside her, something shifted. A soft reminder that love could leave space and still stay true. That evening, Emma's best friend Olivia showed up with a bottle of wine and no judgment. They sat on the floor surrounded by takeout containers, the kind of quiet that only old friends could share. Olivia poured 2 glasses. "Do you love him?" she asked. Emma stared at the rim of her cup. "I think I do." "Then maybe that's the point," Olivia said. "You've spent your whole life trying to be safe. Maybe it's time to be real." Emma smiled faintly. "Being real hurts." "So does holding back," Olivia replied. They talked about everything. Old heartbreaks, missed chances, the kind of fears that still wake you at night. By the time the bottle was empty, Emma's chest felt lighter. Before leaving, Olivia said softly, "If you love him, let him see it. Don't let fear be the loudest voice." After the door closed, Emma stood by the window, city lights trembling outside. Maybe being seen was the only way to stop hiding. The next morning, Emma found herself standing in front of the empty storefront beside the bookstore. The key was still at Daniel's office, but she didn't need it to feel the weight of what it meant. Sunlight cut through the glass, reflecting her face back at her. Tired, unsure, but stronger than before. She placed her palm against the window. "If this is meant to be mine," she whispered, "I'll come back for it." For the first time, the words didn't sound like doubt. They sounded like a promise. She stood there for a while, watching people pass, all of them moving toward something. Then she turned away. Not because she didn't want it, but because she wanted to earn it on her own. Her footsteps echoed down the sidewalk. Behind her, the window held her reflection for a few seconds longer, then let her go. That night, she sat on her couch, phone in hand, her heart caught between fear and clarity. She opened the voice recorder, pressed the red circle, and spoke softly. "Daniel," she said, her voice shaking, "you scared me, because I've never been loved without conditions. I don't want your money. I don't want a fairy tale. I want the man who held me when I was breaking, the one who listened when no one else did." Her breath trembled. "If he's still out there, tell him I'm not running anymore." She stopped the recording and hit send before she could change her mind. The sound of it leaving felt final and freeing all at once. Then she sat back, eyes wet, smile small but certain. For the first time, her tears didn't feel like weakness. They felt like courage finally finding its voice. Morning light painted the sky silver when she climbed the stairs to the rooftop where they used to sit. Daniel was there, book in hand, the same quiet steadiness she remembered. He looked up as she approached. She carried a folder in her hand, the signed lease. "I bought it," she said, "with everything I had. I needed it to be mine before I could be yours." He blinked, breath catching. "You did this alone?" She nodded. "I had to." For a moment, neither moved. Then he stepped closer, eyes soft. "I didn't want to save you," he said. "I just wanted to see you." Emma smiled, tears glinting in the sunlight. "I've never felt more seen." He reached for her, and she let him. No fear, no panic, no pretending, just choice, just love. 6 months later, the little bookstore cafe opened its doors. The sign above read, "The First Page." Inside, light poured through tall windows onto shelves of poetry and soft laughter. Emma ran the cafe in the back, flour on her hands, smile easy. Daniel read on weekends, his voice steady among stories that didn't need to be sold. No headlines, no cameras, just two people who had learned how to stay. Love hadn't rescued her. It had reminded her who she was, someone whole, capable, enough. Outside, a woman paused at the window, watching Emma laugh with a customer. For a moment, she smiled too, as if the warmth had reached her through the glass. If you've ever felt unseen, this story is for you. Tell me, what would your first page be? Subscribe, stay with us, and let the next story find you, because you were never too small to be seen.